to Lifestyles of the Not Jet Set, the travel and tourism show, where no place in the world is ever at risk of being described as merely flyover country. Today, our episode is in the state of Iowa. Iowa, you say to yourself. You've seen listed on the internet the top 100 tourist destinations in the United States, and you're not sure you recall Iowa being on the list. In fact, I had very good reason to want to come to Iowa. Part of it was professional. As somebody who's a food economist, it's important for me to get out of the Northeast from time to time, even as a non-flyer, and to see the agriculture industry and the food manufacturing industry, and there's no better place to do that than Iowa. Today I gave a talk at the Harkin Institute here at Drake University in Des Moines about nutrition policy, and I had a chance to meet colleagues who during the pandemic times I had not been able to see for some time. But even if I did not have a professional reason to be here, I would have wanted to come to Iowa this particular time. I've got family roots in Cedar Rapids that I will tell you about in a bit. Cedar Rapids is the second biggest city in Iowa, so I made sure to stop there for a day on the way. I traveled overland from Chicago by bus through the western Illinois countryside and saw the cities along the Mississippi River that are important in U.S. food transportation, and then eastern Iowa on my way to Cedar Rapids. Once I got to Cedar Rapids, by this time it was a Sunday afternoon, my first stop was St. Paul's Church, a Methodist church that's important architecturally because it was designed by Louis Sullivan, who's famous in American architecture for his influence over the design of the American skyscraper. Because it was already afternoon after the long bus ride, I could not go to the morning service at the church in the beautiful curved sanctuary. The afternoon service was the African language service. The wonderful Pastor Nyanzima and gave the sermon in Swahili, translated into English and into Kirundi, and it gave a sense of the connection to the immigrant history in Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids is most famous for the immigrant history of the Czech and Slovak people. The National Czech and Slovak Museum, which is an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institute, is right there in Cedar Rapids. But in fact, during the 21st century, even in the Midwest, people are coming from all over the world, and it gives a sense of vibrancy and multiculturalism that does not require flying overseas in order to experience it for oneself. So after this wonderful service, I continued my walk from downtown Cedar Rapids eastward to the Brucemore Estate. My grandmother's grandparents were T.M. Sinclair and Caroline Suter, who produced this mansion. Sinclair had moved from Scotland. His family business was in meatpacking, and so he founded the T.M. Sinclair and Company in Cedar Rapids and made the fortune that made possible the purchase of this estate. He did not get to live in it because tragically he died in 1881 falling down an elevator shaft. It reminds a person of how dangerous the food manufacturing industry and American industry was in the 19th century before there were worker safety laws. There was a major explosion, for example, connected with the grain industry in Cedar Rapids that killed dozens of people in the early 20th century and did play a role in the strengthening of regulations for worker safety. The Sinclair Meat Company was later bought out by the Wilson Meats and kept on producing until about the 1980s. The plant is no longer visible along the Cedar River, but many of the other food manufacturing plants are still there, including Quaker Oats and many inputs that go into the food, some of the technical inputs that go into the food manufacturing industry. The wonderful docent at the Brucemore Estate saw me standing around afterwards, recognized that I seemed like I had not come by car and could use a lift back to my hotel. Well, what was going to be a simple lift turned into a wonderful tour of so many of the interesting things to see in Cedar Rapids. The family at the Bruce Moore estate that followed the Sinclairs was the Douglas family, which also had a role in the history of Quaker Oats and some of the other big food businesses, and they were important patrons of the art. Grant Wood, for example, had a porch that he designed on the second floor before he was famous. This was before he painted American Gothic and found widespread global recognition. American Gothic, by the way, is at the Art Institute in Chicago, which I had visited a day before while I was in Chicago, before I caught the bus, along with other great works of American art from the heartland. So this tour included the apartment where Grant Wood had lived when he lived in Cedar Rapids. It included all the Czech neighborhoods, recommendations for where to eat. The docent described his own family history in the area and his parents' work in the food manufacturing in the area. I have a sense that a travel and tourism show about Cedar Rapids cannot possibly be as popular on YouTube as a travel and tourism show about Paris or some other grand place. And it's really not quite fair. If we adjust our mindset from the jet-setting mindset and take interest in the history and human connections in the places that we're passing through as we travel more slowly through life, we find ourselves with the same connection to the global community that we would have had with flying by airplane. I think it gives us all an opportunity to think about during this time of crisis, and I hope it influences you.